So welcome everyone. Welcome to today's Talk Roundtable. Today we are going to be talking about transforming your contingent workforce management. And we're excited, very excited to have Martina Winston joining us to talk about her challenges and successes on that front. So it should be a great interactive discussion today. Definitely everyone feel free to jump in, ask questions, make it a conversation. You don't have to stay in the chat. You can come on camera, you can come on audio. It's a family affair today. So while we're still waiting for some folks to join, if you're new to Talk, Talk is the world's largest talent acquisition professional organization. It's free for talent acquisition and HR professionals. So we're very excited to bring you this content for free every week. And if you are new, you should definitely go on the website, check it out. Usually I'd run through the website and run through some of our features, the forums. You can post polls to benchmark and kind of reach out to our, 12,000 plus, talent acquisition practitioner community to get, benchmarks and data. I'm not going to do that today because we're actually changing the site in the next, I think it's probably 30 to 60 days. There's going to be a lot of new features. It's going to be a lot more interactive. We're really excited about that. So definitely keep coming back. Keep checking out talktalent.com, and I think you'll be really excited about the new direction that it's going to go in. Um, and in the meantime, we also have an upcoming conference on June 3rd and 4th. That's the TalentSphere Summit. That's going to be in Scottsdale, Arizona. So we're really excited about that. It's going to be a really unique kind of conference. We're really focusing on having the speakers be practitioners. So it's going to be led by your peers. It's not going to be a vendor-led or analyst-led discussion. You're going to hear from your peers and hear them, like today, talk about their challenges, talk about their solutions. So it's a really exciting event. We think it's really unique in the industry, and there's also going to be a lot of wellness events throughout the several days. So it's going to be a great way to relax and commiserate with your peers and have fun and network. So definitely check it out. You can get to this on the Talk Talent. .com website. I'll throw it in the chat. Also, a link to sign up as soon as I'm done yapping here. So. Okay, so let's get back to the mission at hand here. Again, we are going to be talking about transforming your contingent workforce management program. So I think let's start with a poll just to get people. Let's set a baseline here for where we're at, uh, and I'll share those questions now. We'd love to see where your contingent program is going over the next year, a little bit about who runs the program, and a little bit about the tools and partners that you're using in your program. So we'll give you like a minute here to answer. If you're just joining, we have a poll live, so you can jump in and take that poll. We'll give another 20 or 30 seconds to get some more responses in here. And I see some people that answered other for who runs contingent labor. If you've answered other, I'm going to ask you to come on audio if you can and tell us. So, all right, let's share these results here. So, yeah, it's interesting. We're the majority of people here are either going to increase or stay the same. That makes sense. I feel like in a challenging economy, contingent is always, at the forefront rather than full-time hiring when companies want to be more risk averse. So that makes sense. What I'm surprised at here is that I feel like in the past, contingent labor programs are often led by procurement, but we're seeing that HR and TA has really taken control, and that's a big shift, I think, over the last 5 years. So that's really interesting. Again, who are the two folks that said other? Where are my other people at? And do you want to jump in and say who runs your program? All right. Well, we'll remain behind the veil of anonymity.
Well, I did
Uh,
say other, Norm, but
oh,
it's hiring managers at our
yes.
company that run it. So I'm one of the others.
Yep, that makes sense. Okay. I'd imagine that's probably what the other answer is too. Um, okay. Um, And then at your company, do you use, and we've got a pretty good mix. A lot of people are using time and attendance, vendor management, yeah, MSPs. So yeah, okay, very good. None of the above those. So we've got a lot of people here that are looking to learn and aren't that deep into their program, and so that's cool. So we're excited. Let's talk about it. Um, so. I would like to first let me intro our speakers today. And again, this is more of a conversation, so jump in. If you have questions, don't be afraid to shout them out, put them in the chat, but definitely come on audio, raise your hand, whatever you want to do. But let's make it a conversation. Um, so we're very excited to have Martina Winston. She has a wealth of experience in TA and HR, so we're really excited that she can share that with us today. Currently, she's been at Protective Life for over 10 years, and she's currently the VP and head of talent there and DE&I. She's also had past senior TA and HR roles at Best Buy and Regions Finance. And she's extremely active in her community and local charities in the greater Birmingham area. So that's really cool I learned a little bit about that. And she has very justly been the recipient of numerous awards and recognitions in the community and in her professional career, most recently being named one of the bad women of Birmingham. So we're very excited to have Martina with us. And also joining her will be Justin. And Justin's actually has a really unique perspective on the contingent world. I'm excited to hear what he has to say here. He helps hundreds of companies and thousands of practitioners, whether it's employers, staffing firms, MSPs, to work together and create more efficient contingent programs. So I think he's kind of seeing it from all sides of things. So really interested to see what he has to say today. So actually, I'll turn it over to you, Justin, if that's okay, and you can maybe like set the stage for us a little bit.
Absolutely. Thank you, Norm. And hello to everybody. So as Norm mentioned, I'm kind of at the epicenter of working with staffing firms, MSPs, and clients leading talent acquisition within their company. And so at that epicenter, I'm seeing more and more of a trend towards a contingent extended model in the workforce. And a recent study I read from McKinsey states that by the end of the decade, so honestly, we're more than halfway there. More than 50% of the workforce will be contingent. So I work with my clients to implement both tools and processes to prepare them for those changes. And interestingly, I'm finding that a majority of companies are not in a position to strategically take advantage of these inefficiencies and turn those inefficiencies into opportunities, because they are opportunities just disguised as inefficiencies, because they're really transformative when done correctly and can positively impact the brand of a company. And I've seen this at Protective, where Martina is working, and we can talk about that in a little bit. But it can really promote team cohesion, integrating your contingent workforce into your company culture. But part of the issue in getting that underway is just the sheer quantity of stakeholders. So we saw in the poll, there's a number of different stakeholders involved in any given organization, whether it be HR, TA, procurement, et cetera. These people are all involved in reshaping the contingent workforce. And I found it very effective to evolve the thinking of companies in general, just to understand that contingent workers are no longer a line item on a procurement checklist, so to speak, but they're an integral part, they're a core part of company culture. And when looked at as such, that can really promote and kind of catapult an organization forward in their operational efficiency. And I've had the personal privilege of working with a lot of forward-looking leaders like Martina, who I'm going to introduce in a second. They're really leading the charge to bridge that gap between HR, TA, hiring managers, et cetera, and streamline contingent workforce management, while at the same time enhancing visibility, establishing cost controls, and compliance, all while generating significant cost savings and obvious ROI. So being at the center of all of this, I can kind of speak a little bit about what I'm seeing from all areas. But I think somebody who's better equipped to speak from her direct experience would be Martina, who I've had the privilege of working with over the last few years. And I've really seen her take a nation contingent workforce program and turn it into a thriving one. And it's really my honor to introduce her. And I think you're going to all get a lot out of listening to her. I know I have over the years. I've learned a lot. And with that, I will turn it over to Martina and let Martina take it away.
Thank you, Justin, and thank you, Norm, and thank you to the Talk community for allowing me to join you. I think that this is a very vibrant, thriving community for us to be able to share best practices and learn from each other. Now, I'm going to go ahead and tell you all off the bat, Norm and Justin have been extremely generous to talk about my experience and my expertise. I'm learning every day, just like you all are, because the landscape is changing. So even though I might have a few tools in my toolbox, I hope that I can learn from you all as well, because this has definitely been a journey that I can say my team collectively has been on. And again, I appreciate Justin and Norm raving about the work that I've done, but I would not have been able to do this without my team and our collective strategy that we've been able to implement together. There's also been a little bit of blood, sweat, and tears throughout this work. Where now that we've been on the other side of it, we've definitely been able to see the fruits of our labor, but I can tell you that we've had some leaders, we've had some vendors go kicking and screaming as we have implemented this process. So again, Justin and Norm, thank you for allowing this conversation, which I think is very important. And as I looked at the data, as everyone shared, we are all seeing, I would say for the most part, an increased amount of engagement around our contingent workforce. I think over the last several years, particularly as we think about pre-COVID, a lot of our organizations shifted their acquisition from a talent perspective strategy to really think about how do we ensure that we are balancing costs, that we're continuing to transform our organizations to be able to sustain growth, but also think about how can we get the talent that we need at the right time, at the right place, doing the right things, but also as we think about cost-saving measures, how can we do that? One of the things that we wanted to understand, which we did not have a really good grasp on prior to us engaging with our partners at Recruitifi, was we had temporary and contingent talent just running wild across our organization. We had no idea who was coming in, who was going out, what was the full scope of the work that they were doing. And that, as you all can understand, there's a compliance risk to that, to make sure that we know and understand the scope overall of what is the talent, who is the talent? Where are they coming from? What's the start and the finish of the work that they're doing? And it also provides really good governance from an organization standpoint, and also just for our hiring leaders as well. It also allows for our partners, which we partner very, very heavily with, our HR partners and also the hiring managers. It allows the recruiters to partner from a talent strategy perspective to think about if we've got temporary and or contingent talent in the organization for a long period of time, then we might need to think a little bit more about our talent strategy and also understand our talent needs. There should not be a situation where you're calling a temporary talent or contingent talent that's been in your organization for years. That looks and probably feels a little bit more like a permanent talent. And so we need to think about our strategy. This process also helped us to understand our costs. Ooh, I like that, Alice. Alice says 100%. There we go. Now that's what I like. You're talking to me. We also wanted to understand our cost. Because we didn't even have a good understanding of, well, how much are we spending on this temporary talent? This was also cost that we started to see that was, I would say, hidden. Our hiring managers and our P&L leaders really didn't understand the cost that they were spending for temporary and contingent talent. So when we had an opportunity to interact and engage and implement what we called our Recruitifi 2.0, is where we engage with the Recruitifi team to implement the platform of managing soup to nuts our temporary and contingent workforce. It has been a complete game changer. We actually, this is live. I promise you, this is not a set up from the Talk or Recruitifi team. This is live. But my partner in crime, who is our director of talent acquisition, Eric Hess, had an opportunity to do our 2024 talent acquisition year in review, where he had an opportunity to go into our Recruitifi platform system, go through and review all of our engagements for 24 for a temp and contingent workforce. We were able to put a dollar amount of how much we spent in the contingent workforce, who were our vendors that we partnered with. We also had an opportunity to understand how many temporary resources we brought into the organization in 2024. And we were able to also break it down for where did that temporary talent go into the organization. And we had never been able to really put our finger on that data before. So again, not only does this process allow for a good opportunity for you to have really good governance, it also allows for you to understand how is it impacting your bottom line and your P&L. And then you can also get really good data to be able to have those conversations with your hiring managers and also with your HR partners to understand here's where we're spending our money. And I can tell you that one of our partners just last week when we presented this data to them, their eyes were really, really big because they didn't realize, neither did the P&L leader realize how much money we were spending in a particular area. Now, I'm not going to air our dirty laundry and I'm not going to put them on blast, but it was a pretty big eye opener for that HR partner and that business leader to see, wow, we've got some pretty significant spend in this area and we need to understand and think about our talent strategy. So let me get into, I would say, the specific details of how we did this, because I think that this is really important. And y'all continue to talk back to me. So if you have any questions around our processes, then I'm more than happy to answer questions on the fly. And so one of the things that, and I think I saw, and I can't remember who mentioned it came off mute to share that they answered the question around who is really driving the process. Somebody said other. I think actually there were two people that said other. And one person spoke up and said, actually, it's our hiring managers that's driving the process. I want you to know you're not on this island by yourself. We were there with you. I would say 18 months ago, 12 to 18 months ago, we were there with you. And our hiring managers had really, really deep, almost scary relationships with our external vendors and our staffing vendors prior to us implementing this process. So scary to the point to where we were technically what I like to call, and my team has heard this, I think I have a few of my team members on this call, we were just Burger King. We were taking an order and we were filling the order. That's it. And our hiring managers were already engaged and working alongside our vendors to talk through their talent strategies and their temporary needs within their business. So by the time we got I would say the order, all we were doing was putting the cheese, the mayonnaise, adding the onion, taking the onion away. That's all we were doing. We weren't involved in the conversation or in the process. And I'll tell you, this process was not only implemented for our temp and contingent, this is also a process that we implemented for our permanent, I would say our permanent relationships as well. As we knew that this was going to be a huge change management effort, and that's something that I would definitely lead with to say, anytime you are going to engage with your hiring managers, your HR partners, and also your external staffing vendors, you've got to make sure everyone is along this journey with you. Even though we knew that this was going to be a lot of change management for both sides of the coin, internally and also externally, we wanted to make sure that we brought our external vendors along for the ride and in the process as well. We actually held an open house with all of our vendors when we were implementing this new process for our temp and our contingent and permanent workforce. We wanted to talk to them a little bit about our overall business strategy so they can understand the shift that we were seeing in our business, where we would not have as many permanent I would say permanent opportunities, and where we would see more of a contingent temporary workforce opportunity, but also understand the process that they were going to have to go through to ensure that they knew where we were in our strategy. Now, this was a little bit different because all of our vendors had never, I don't think they've ever been in a room together in this capacity. And so it was a little bit uncomfortable. We said we wanted to give them a little bit of their own cooking, but we also wanted to make sure that they all heard the same message. We did not want them to think that we didn't like them anymore or that we didn't want to engage with them. We just wanted them to understand, here's our permanent placement process, and also here's our temp and contingent process, which meant if they wanted to engage with us, they were going to have to be an approved vendor on the Recruitifi platform, and that we would, we would cast a wide net, which is a job cast. We would throw a job cast out there to any approved vendor. So everyone would be on the same level playing field. We would no longer just handpick or cherry pick those vendors that maybe we liked, or maybe they brought our favorite donuts, or maybe they brought our favorite pizza and wined and dined us. I saw a few of you all laughing, or wined and dined us. That was not what our strategy was going to be. We wanted everyone to be on a level playing field. And I can tell you, we've seen a significant shift in how our vendors, I would say, align to how they present talent. Some of our vendors are quicker at the draw than others, and some of them sometimes miss out on being able to compete or bid for that job. And the reason why we like this approach, number one, it removes us from the process of getting handpicking and cherry picking those vendors that we're going to reach out to, but it also just created an opportunity for everyone to be on an even level playing field, because we thought that was really important. The other thing that we did was we went on a road show to socialize our strategy and our process, not only to our external vendors, but we also did that to what we call our frequent flyer hiring managers. So these are our managers that we're constantly working with. They constantly are engaging with us on permanent placements that we would have historically used an external vendor, and also those leaders that have temp and contingent needs. And so we went on a road show to socialize with them. Here's the process. Here is how you should engage with us and our vendors. The other thing that we did, we drew a hard line in the sand to say that we are in first chair, meaning our recruiters, our internal recruiters are in first chair to ensure that we are competing and sourcing and recruiting for the job first, not the external vendor. So that was the other thing that was a huge shift for us, is we wanted to make sure that our hiring managers knew that our process. Oh, Alice is my new best friend. I love me some Alice. She's definitely tracking along with me. But we wanted to make sure that our hiring managers knew that we were going to compete for the job. We were going to fill the job. We were going to source. We were going to go out and find the talent. And we also created a timeline to say we were going to allow 30 to 45 days for us to be in first chair before we aligned and engaged a vendor. This is specifically for our permanent placements. And then for our temp and our contingent, we recognize that a lot of times you need temp and contingent talent fast. But again, before any hiring manager should engage with a vendor, they should be talking to us first so that we can negotiate those contract fees. We can negotiate those percentages. The other thing that I would say that has been a really benefit to us having all of this on the Recruitifi platform is there's no longer this back and forth on us looking at MSAs and also competing and combating on percent for contracts or percent placements on what the vendor is paying and what we're paying. We have pretty consistent percentages across the board. Now, we do recognize for some of that more complex talent, that percentage might be a little bit higher, but for the most part, everything is consistent. We're also not having to lean on our vendor management or our legal team for very long and extensive contract reviews. We have a process in place with Recruitifi that is aligned, and we have a checklist on these are the criteria that you have to meet as a vendor in order to be aligned with Protective. There's insurance requirements, there's background requirements, there's other risk and liability requirements. And if you do not meet the mark, then you're not going to be able to compete for the job. Now, I can tell you, talk about ruffling some feathers. This really got people in a tizzy. And we said, unfortunately, we're not going to remove our risk mitigators to make sure that you can be the person that we're working with, because we have other vendors that can, number one, check the box on the risk requirements that we have, and they can compete for the job. Now, I don't want you all to take away that we were boycotting or we had any issues with any of our vendors. We love all of our vendors, and we love the donuts and the pizza and the wine and dining. We think that they are great. We just wanted to make sure that we have a really good process internally, because our hiring managers were honestly skipping over us. And we just didn't think that that was fair. We have really good, talented recruiters on our team that I would put up against any staffing firm any day of the week. And so it was a huge process. It was a really huge change management process, I would say. And again, I know that I have several of my team members here. It probably took about 6 months for us to walk along that process and hold each other hand. But after we, I would say, turn the lights on and flip the switch as of January 1, 2024, it was game on. And I can tell you that anytime we had a vendor that skipped over that process, myself and my partner in crime, Eric, we were on the phone slapping hands and saying, you know the process, we told you the process, and we are more than welcome to remove you from our Recruitifi platform if you cannot follow this process. And then people get all weird and scared and shake it in their boots and all that stuff. But we've been very clear. Same thing with our hiring managers. We've been very direct with our hiring managers to ensure that we're walking them through that process. Now, here's a caveat. We do recognize that there are some complex roles that have very niche skill set. We're looking for a niche type of talent. Also, specifically when we're looking for our executive level roles, we have a completely different process. And I know y'all know that. Y'all get it. Y'all aren't throwing those executive level jobs, in those processes anyway. But we wanted to make sure that our hiring managers and our vendors knew that when the tough gets tough, we'll come to you. When it's a little bit more complex, we'll come to you. Don't worry about that. So I'm going to stop. I'm going to give myself a breath because I know that I went through a lot. And I see that there are questions that are coming through the chat. So Norm, I would love to be able to stop and answer some questions if that's okay.
Definitely. So Debbie, you were asking about direct contact with the hiring manager. Do you want to expand upon that, or?
Sure. So I'm in a really cool position where I stood up a contingent worker program with a managed service provider in 2018 through Global Atlantic, which is a financial services company. And Global Atlantic was purchased by KKR, and we're actually integrating with them. So different than a regular portco, we'll be part of KKR. So I actually just started last week working directly for KKR, building a contingent management program for them, and then we'll integrate the GA legacy program as well. So,
Nice.
In 2018, I did all those same things, Martina, but I led TA for Global Atlantic. And so I already had some really good wins with hiring managers. I knew the organization, they trusted me by the time I, started this. And so it was easier for me to slap hands of hiring managers and call them and be like, hey, because I had already had some goodwill with helping them out in other ways. And so I asserted the team to really you cannot reach out to a vendor without coming to us. Vendors, if you go out to the manager, you can get kicked off our list, all the same things. Right. Now that I'm over in this new world, we're I don't really know the people. I'm going to come in right away and just implement this program. I don't have that goodwill built in this new team. And so I'm just kind of curious how other people have gone about that. And, I think those relationships that vendors have, sometimes it goes both ways. The managers really love it and they like getting the donuts. And so I just was curious, when the vendors are told, you have to come to us first, right? Do we still allow for those relationships to happen? Because what I found at GA, without good governance, they skirt the program, and they'll what will happen is they'll go directly to the vendor, give them the heads up that there's a opening. And then when the position gets open in the VMS, the vendor that they're friends with already submits candidates and they just want to move forward. So it's not, so the VMS we work with, it's, it used to be Pro Unlimited, now it's Magnet. It's a reverse bidding process. And so anytime a vendor submits a candidate through the portal, the bill rate is shared with the other vendors. And so it helps keep the bill rate down, right? So it's a competitive process. And so the hope is that if you're in that marketplace, that you're saving costs because of that as well. And if they're going directly to the search firm and they're not leveraging that process, like we have no way to control that cost. And so I just wanted to hear other people's thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, Debbie, first of all, kudos to you for already, embracing and embarking this journey, and also thoughts to you for having to try to do it again with this new organization. And I was in the same boat that you were in, as Norm mentioned as he was reading out my bio. I have been an HR leader within this organization for years before I took on the talent acquisition team. So I also had some trust, some capital built in. People trusted me. And they were like, okay, if Martina says she's going to get it done, then I trust that she's going to get it done. But I would say, and would definitely love to open it up to the talk community, because I know you all have some tricks up your sleeves too. I think going in to focusing on that change management and bringing people along in the journey to help them understand the why and then the end result, because what leader, especially a leader that is controlling and responsible and accountable for a P&L, is going to argue with cost savings? I mean, especially if it impacts their bottom line. And then also, as you think about sharing, here are the methods that we're going to use to source talent. Here's how you're going to be engaged. And we have never said you cannot talk to your neighbor that is a recruiter at this firm. I mean, that's crazy. However, we just ask for the same amount of respect that they give them to give to us, because we are together. We care about, at the end of the day, we care about the future protector that is going to join Protective. We care about their experience from soup to nuts. We're thinking about their long-term career trajectory. We want them to be a part of our organization. We want them to be a part of an organization where they feel like they can thrive. That vendor is thinking about putting a cheek in a seat. That's it. And they're not going to worry about them at further. We're thinking about them for life, not the vendor. And so that's how we've gone in to that. And I think that our hiring managers have appreciated that. But again, as I think about you embracing this new journey with this new implementation, I will go in with sharing your strategy and bringing them along the way as you move forward. Any other thoughts or feedback that anyone might have from the talk community?
Yeah, Alice, you had chimed in also talking about your hiring leaders and the challenges.
Sorry, I'm real active, and this is like a super passionate spot of mine is our contingent workforce management program. We lead that in talent acquisition, and we've been on a long road. I've been with the organization now for over 10 years, and it's been a journey through change management. But part of the things that have really worked for us have been like the what's in it for our hiring leaders. And we use this like WIFM, like what's in it for me statement. And so for our hiring leaders, we're like, wouldn't it be nice if you aren't the ones managing all of that communication with these agencies? We know how much they're checking in. We'd love to take that and just really manage that and streamline that. You know, the emphasis on candidate experience is huge as well. So ensuring that we're as TA part of that journey. Now we own pretty much everything. And so even now hiring leaders, if they get something from an agency, they automatically send it to us. We also have built into all of our contract language that all communication around requisitions, candidate communication, dispositions comes through talent acquisition. So we actually have restricted agencies via our contract language from not reaching out to our hiring leaders to do that, just because it was a pretty significant thing that we needed to move away from. So I know not all organizations that may not work, but that was something for us that we're a healthcare organization, so we live and die by contracts and regulatory guidelines. And so our contracts, that was the most powerful place for us to really start what we wanted those relationships to look like.
Yeah, and Alice, similar for us too. We start now getting, those invites and the donuts and the come join us for happy hours. We're getting those forwarded. I kind of love the leaders that are like, oh my gosh, I'm scared to engage. That's right. That's exactly how you're supposed to be. And we still do engage with our vendors. Don't get us wrong. The other thing, so the first time we were implementing this, again, we had an open house, and I promised them that I would bring them back mid-year to give them an update. So we did that. We brought them back in the summer. And we gave them an update of here's how things are rolling at Protective. Here's what you can expect. And, you know, what was interesting, I think the first time they came all together, very optimistic. They didn't know what to expect. The second time, I think they had a little bit of understanding what the flavor was going to be, what the flavor is going to be about. And their questions were very specifically directed to our business and also how they could help. And then some of them had some insurance limits that they couldn't make. So they were trying to figure out how they can get that to work. But for the most part, I mean, again, we have caught a few people along the way that still had some weigh-ins, and we've just been really direct to say that's not our process. And I think that we've seen a level of appreciation. The other thing I'll tell you is we have saved from a permanent placement, we saved in 2024 over $1.2 million. I mean, it was insane where we were spending over $2 million a year at a minimum with this engagement. Now, what was really interesting as we implemented this for our temp and contingent workforce, as you all might recall, I said we weren't able to understand our spend and we had very little governance around that. What we found is in 2024, we saved 1.2 for permanent placement, but then we ended up spending over $2 million for temp and contingents. And so again, this was really good visibility for our leaders to see, should we really be spending that amount of money in our temps? So now this really helps us be more strategic around our process and thinking about our talent strategies that honestly we really weren't doing before, which I think is really good. So I'm really excited as we move into 25 and as we partner with the hiring managers and our HR partners to really talk about our strategy and say, what is the type of talent that we need? The other thing that I didn't talk about a whole lot, but we also implemented a new process around gig talent as well. I'm sure a lot of you all are engaging in gig talent. We work with another vendor and partner called Upwork, where you can, again, kind of throw out a job cast of, I'm looking for someone to do this specific thing for these amount of hours. And it's very different from temp where you're not giving system access, you're not giving it, I need you to build this logo. It should take you 2 hours. Here's how much we're paying you and it's done. And that was also another great way for us to help our leaders because sometimes it's, do you really need a temp resource? Oh, that temp resource has been here for 6 months and they made one logo? Really? So it's been, again, a good way for us to lean into leveraging different levers to pull for talent needs. And all of our talent needs isn't a permanent full-time FTE or part-time FTE or PTE. It's not a temp, it's not a contingent, it's not a consultant, or it could be a gig worker. So we've just been very intentional about helping our leaders understand what levers to pull for talent.
Yeah, Martina, I know just having worked with you along this process that what I've seen is that you've slowly uncovered and now have full, robust reporting on everything that's going on. And just curious to hear how the leaders in your organization are changing their strategic take on what type of worker to be putting in, let's say, an IT role versus something else. And like, how should they be permanent? Should they be contingent? Should they be gig? How is that data impacting the strategic vision of your leadership team?
Yeah, I'm really glad that you asked this question, Justin. I'm going to have to brag on one of my talent acquisition specialists. This wasn't planned, but I'm just thinking about this now. One of the things that when we implemented this process, and I think this is also going back to Debbie's comment around when you already have trust and some of that intellectual capital already built in with leaders, it's easier to go in with a change. When there's a little bit of optimism and not quite sure, and you have an opportunity to prove, I'm gonna say the naysayers wrong, I'm gonna really have to tilt my hat off to Byron Dial, who is one of our talent acquisition specialists who really took a strategic approach to know that he had a few naysayers in the area of the business that he was working with to say, you know what, let me meet you where you are. Let's talk about the type of talent that you usually like to source for. What are those skill sets that, and by the way, it wasn't driven by a requisition. It wasn't even driven by a talent need. This was strategy work. This was rolling up our sleeves, really getting down and dirty with, let's talk about the talent that you're looking for in your pocket of your organization. You know, what's the good, what's the bad, what's the ugly. Let's look at a few test profiles. Let's look at a few test resumes to see what would you say, yes, that's gold star, that's gold standard. And what would you turn your nose up, say, I would never be interested. Byron took some time to work with a group of leaders within what we like to call our pods. We have a pod structure where everybody's aligned to a certain business lane. And he spent several weeks really trying to understand the perfect profile of candidates so that when it was time, and he could also take that as a proactive approach to start to really source the market and start to build benches of talent from a temporary standpoint and also for a permanent standpoint. And that just really spoke wonders. It was also, as you think about how we work with our hiring managers, it allowed for Byron to start building some of that intellectual capital and trust with his leaders because his leaders felt like they were a part of the sausage making. They felt like they were part of the secret sauce and the formula. So when it was time for those requisitions to come, Byron already had a pipeline of talent already built. He was already ready to present candidates to the managers. And we were almost working like what and how the managers were used to their vendors to work because we already had people on the bench. And Debbie, I think you mentioned it where by the time that requisition got to you, the vendors already knew and they already were able to present talent. We weren't even able to compete. It wasn't even a fair playing field. And so I think that strategy is something that all of my team took that on, and they're able to really, as long as our hiring managers work alongside us, they give us that same level playing field that they were giving their best friend, sister, cousin, brother, neighbor, then we could also present ourselves best foot forward with pipelines of talent, and we can compete. And then also at the end of the day, it's getting the talent in the seat and making sure that we're presenting thriving talent that's going to be successful in the organization. And I would say right now, I mean, our batting average is pretty good. We're doing a pretty good job. We would right now give the Chicago Cubs a run for their money.
Martina, how many people work at Protective that are contingent and that are full-time?
Oh, that's a great question. So our workforce is about 3,800 people overall, and we have about, I'm going to lump a lot of different people into this number, but our contingent, temporary, and consultant workforce is about 700. It's pretty large.
So that's like very similar sort of to like the size of Global Atlantic. And so as I'm stepping into KKR, one of my first challenges will be to understand who is in like what classification type. And
Yes.
so they've sort of done a classification that looks at managed service providers, project work, hospitality. They have a huge hospitality, like janitorial staff team, which I think is really managed services, and then staff aug, and it's international. So they have about 1,900 people in all these buckets. And I'm trying to figure out like what's actually in scope for this contingent workforce, time and material, like truly augmenting a full-time staffing need. And, you know, I think we could do this kind of looking through contracts and seeing who is billing hourly, but I was wondering if anyone on this call had any perspective on how you guys tackled that, because I don't think the managers have like a lot of information on how they're doing
They don't. And we actually did this work. Debbie, I'm glad that you mentioned this. That exercise that you're talking about is critical in step one, is you've got to understand where do you have the buckets of people. We had a project that we worked on actually for a couple of years in partnership with our HR compliance team, our HRIS team, vendor management, and talent acquisition, because we just had everybody classified as the same thing, and we knew that that wasn't right. And so that's another reason why this process is really important. So we were able to see, you know what, 59 people came in as temporaries in 2024, and we had never even been able to get our number. Everybody was just like lumped into one big classification, and we knew that that wasn't right. And as you know, Debbie, I'm sure, and others on this call, there's some compliance risk to that. And also, IT security risk as well. So we needed to understand. But yeah, I'm open to hear from other people on the call. How have you all attacked kind of understanding those classifications?
If no one knows, when I'm done with it, I can get back to everybody and let you know how it goes.
Now we'll just start calling on people.
Yeah. And then Debbie, again, I'm happy to connect with you offline to I can bring my peers, and we can talk through a little bit of how we approach it again with our HRIS leader, our HR compliance leader, and vendor management. Happy to go offline with you if needed.
That'd be great. I already connected with you on LinkedIn. I appreciate it.
Hey, I love it. New LinkedIn connections. I love it.
I'm curious, and if anybody else has anything else, but I'm curious, Martina, you talked about saving over $1 million. Where does that savings come from? Was that because you were able to get the control and get them to stop leapfrogging you, or was it through like Recruitifi, through like their community, or was it like where are you getting that number from?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think it's all of the above. I would definitely say that we would not have been able to do it without a clear understanding and clarity around our strategy, number one. So everyone was aligned and on the same page. Now, I'm not going to say they liked it, but they were aligned. So I think that's number one. Number two is there was really strong partnership between talent acquisition, our HR partners, and our hiring managers and our vendors. So there was also a really strong change management effort with our HR partners too, because we needed them to help re-steer our hiring managers if they went rogue. And we also needed that support to say, hey, we're all in this together. I would say the third thing that helped with the cost savings is, again, just making sure that we were all communicating across the aisles and making sure that everyone knew what the approach was. And if for some reason we would get a little off kilter, then we would know why. Now, we did have some placements, but they were warranted. The placement was warranted and it made sense. And then even as we think about now leveraging the data, so this is where Recruitifi came into play. It was extremely important for us to have that platform so that we could understand that data that we didn't have before. So now we're being very strategic to work alongside our HR partners and our hiring managers here over the next 30 days for them to dive deep into that data to say, okay, what is the data telling us? Where did the talent go? How long did we need it? What could we have done differently? And if we walk away and say, yes, that $2 million that we spent in temp and contingent workforce was actually warranted, then great. But if we also step alongside and we go through that exercise and we realize, you know what, we probably could have saved a couple of $100,000. We could have closed that contract early, or we really didn't need that resource, or that resource didn't work out, or we actually still have that person on the books. So could that have been a permanent placement? I think it will lend us really well when we go into our budgeting process here this summer, which I think, again, our leaders will have that information at their fingertips that they didn't have before. But I would definitely say, Norm, that alignment is really what helped us with that cost savings of over $1 million. And also just commitment. We were extremely committed to making sure that we hit that number.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a challenge to get that many people on the same page. So that's impressive. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It is. I'm sure that there was a few people that probably wanted to, they were really upset with me because they weren't getting donuts and they weren't getting pizza parties and stuff like that. We're like, but you're getting talent. You're getting talent. And I also, too, I think that this was a really good exercise for our internal hiring managers and those P&L leaders and our senior leaders to see the talent that we have on our team as well, and to know that, hey, we can compete and we can do the same stuff.
Awesome. Do we have any other questions? We got some time for a few more discussions, a few more topics or challenges you're. else? Yeah.
I'm curious, we're looking at right now, so we do have some modified processes, like we've got a call center and claims processing where now we are very much reliant on bringing in temporary workers first. They get, what's this job like? Can I see if it's right for me? Since we've been doing that and really only hiring, the temporary folks into those jobs on a regular go forward basis, we've seen a lot better first year retention. We used to see when we'd hire people cold right into those jobs, they were like, this is not what I thought it was going to be. And we'd see really high first year turnover. So that's been really great in those two specific groups. And we're working on a more formal policy because we're like, why are we running a full recruitment to bring them on board after they've already been a temp? And so we're starting to write some policies and processes around what that could look like so that we don't have to do a full-blown recruitment just to convert them into a regular employee. And I'm curious what that process looks like for you all.
Yeah, that's a great question. We don't do a full recruitment for those folks that we convert from temp to perm. Now, there are some things that we do just to comply with some of our compliance regulatory, check the box. So we do require our vendors for temporaries, excuse me, and contingents to make sure they do a background process that aligns with our processes. But once a person becomes, we're converting them to permanent, the only thing that we do is we do rerun a background and kind of check the box on the things that we need to. But as far as, and then I would say the other things that we do is now we start to run them through making them look and feel like a real protective employee. So we've got, different trainings and different, I would say, compliance check the box trainings. We're folding them into normal, routines, performance management. We do that after, because from a temporary perspective, again, we don't want them, temporaries and contingents, we don't want them to have this look and feel of they are an employee, because that gets us in trouble, especially when we're thinking about performance management measures. And so again, it's not a full recruitment process, but we do lean in very heavy on a full onboarding process, if that makes sense. So that if for some reason, once they are converted to permanent, we want to make sure there's a clear understanding of here's what we expect now that you are a part of the protected family. But we don't do the full recruitment process. We just convert.
Okay. Yeah, we're especially when we've got large groups of temps as well that might be competing for just 2 positions, and we've got 10 that are in that same classification. So I think it'll probably depend on what that looks like every time, but looking at helping to streamline that too, so that folks who have been in a temp role for 6 months and a regular role opens up. I appreciate.
What's your industry, Alice? I'm sorry.
Health insurance.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Let's connect on LinkedIn.
I already sent you an invite.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Of course, recruiters are already all on top of it.
We're already connecting. We're like, what's their background and experience?
That's right. I love it.
I'm curious too. So we have had some more recent things around offboarding folks, whether it's performance or whether it's an assignment ending early that we haven't, sometimes people are putting in for extension requests. We see a lot of that. And then they're like, oh, cancel that. They did this one thing and now I want to end their assignment. And we're like, at least have a conversation with them. We don't do a lot of after 5 o'clock, the agency is calling them unless it's something so significant that we will do that. So we also separate a little bit differently, but I'm curious what that looks like for you, in terms of the ending assignments and offboarding.
Yeah, I think that this is a space that we need to continue to mature. We also engage with, again, depending on the severity of the issue, obviously, but we engage with the vendor to do that offboarding. But we, and a lot of times too, we're the ones that's managing that process to remove the hiring manager from that. Now, again, sometimes the hiring managers get a little ahead of themselves and they do their own thing, but we do engage with the vendor on them doing the offboarding and having those conversations. Now, we provide feedback to the vendor on, the good, the bad, or the ugly, and we ask that they provide that versus, again, the manager getting involved there, because, again, we don't want we don't want that employee, that temporary resource to feel like they're an employee. And then if the manager says something that they shouldn't have, or doesn't, articulate something, we're trying to remove the manager from that equation. We provide the feedback to the vendor and we ask them to articulate and communicate that to the resource.
And also, Martina, like from a compliance perspective and co-employment, if a manager is providing feedback directly to the worker, then
Right.
you're putting yourself at risk there. So it's better.
That's right. That's right. And then they're employee. They feel like an employee. We're now managing performance versus the tactical day-to-day that of course you should have a manager manage. But the other things is, again, we're going back to the vendor to manage that because they are their employee.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We found we've been identifying a lot of talent internally and then using payroll services. And so it's felt like in those opportunities that the agency has a little less feeling of ownership. I mean, they're still their employee, but they feel like I didn't source this person. You just sent their name and information. I onboarded and we're paying them. But it's less like I developed the relationship with this temp and I placed them on an assignment. And so that could just be a shift that we're experiencing too, because it's felt a little different the past couple of years. And I think that's one of the things for us.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it is a little bit different when you are doing the payroll service and they're pretty much the admin. So that does feel a little bit different for them. Yeah, but thanks for asking. I'm curious to hear how that journey goes for you.
I know we're almost up against time, but one of the other things that I would highlight in my experience working with folks like Martina and Alice and Debbie, you all have your programs and your experiences lined up in such a way where you can run a PMO and not need to go to an MSP and pay outrageous fees that once you have an organized process, you're able to actually efficiently run it and not have to pay the additional markup to an MSP. And I'm curious what other people are seeing out there. I mean, it looked in the poll earlier that very few people on this call were using MSPs, but are more and more people looking to service this in-house, this contingent workforce need in-house, like Martina and Debbie and Alice?
I'm not actually doing an in-house. Magnet is an MSP, so it's vendor paid, so they charge the vendor to be on the vendor list. Now, whether or not that vendor is charging back that increase to us, perhaps, but for us, it's worth the cost because they manage the compliance, the risk. They're managing all the contracts and all the flexibility, the vendor list, the reporting. It's all in one place, and they do all of our billing. We get one invoice from them, so it seems to work nice, but I am interested. Like I did put in a demo for Recruitifi just because I'd like to know, like if I did manage it myself instead of outsourcing it, how much work would that actually be? Does that make sense? I think it's a different way to consider it, but so far it hasn't seemed to be a big expense on us.
Yep.
And they provide us resources through the MSP to support the program, so we don't have to have as many people supporting it in-house.
Mm-hmm. Yep, it would be worth taking a look at for sure.
Yeah. Well, Justin and Norm, I know we're at time. I just wanted to say and make sure everyone left with all of the processes and all the things that we were able to implement and this change management journey that we on. Honestly, we could not have done anything without our recruiters, without our hiring managers, and also without the vendors saluting the flag and saying, okay, Martina, you got us. We'll follow your process and we'll stop harassing you with cookies and donuts. And it's been a really good journey that we've been on to ensure that we're being very savvy and financially responsible as business owners, and also ensuring that we're getting the right talent in the organization. So Justin and Norm, thank you for allowing me to share a few of our best practices here from Protective and the journey that we've been on.
No, thank you so much, Martina. This has been great, informative, lively. This has been a great discussion. So thank you, Martina. Thank you, Justin. Thank you, everybody who showed up. And come back to talktalent.com for another session like this, and check out Talent Sphere in June, and we'll see you all there. All right.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Take care, everyone. Thanks again.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.